Whoa. Fetch. Sit. And I mean you. Hi, I'm Scott Linden. This is the Upland Nation podcast. We're going to be talking about training the human side of the dog-human equation with pro trainer Talmage Smedley. Yes, he's got some thoughts on how important it is for the humans to learn right alongside their dogs, and I'll be delving deep into that with him. Of course, we'll also talk about your hunting season, how it's going, so all the juicy details are coming up on your opening weekend. You've had time to marinate on that, and I asked about it on social media. I'll share a lot of those comments with you. And then a listener question on finding training pigeons. Some of the ways that I've succeeded over the years and some suggestions on where you might as well if you're looking for some of that. So stick around for all of that on the Upland Nation podcast, made possible by Mid-Valley Clays and Shooting School, TrulockChokes Tubes, Purina Pro Plan Sport Dog Food, Sage and Breaker Gun Care Products, Cable Gangs Tie-Out Systems, Pointer Shotguns, Heartland Lodge, and HiViz Sights. Well, what an opener for us. Speaking of that sort of thing, I'm not going to go into detail because I'll probably do that later. But one thing that really stuck out, we were there with a whole bunch of friends, and some closer than others, some who became friends because they were in the same spot at the same time over the last couple of years. Been fascinating to see how that all plays out. Had an opportunity to, a retired couple that comes down to visit. They were in my dog club. Now they're without a dog. They come down anyway. They do a little bit of hunting as best they can without a dog. We had a free morning, and I thought, well, what the heck? Let's show them a good time in a spot that we know might pay off, and sure enough, it did. One of the kind of interesting twists on that whole story was they had lost their Brittany a few years back. My good friend Dave had a Brittany that could have been their dog's twin. So the first thing we did was put that Brittany on the ground with Neil and Terry, and Neil was going to hunt along with us, but by the end of the hunt, he'd never even put his gun together and taken a shot. He was just so enamored with watching another great Brittany learn and enjoy what they do best. You know, just another argument for taking somebody else hunting once in a while. You never know how that's going to play out. So keep your eyes and ears open for an opportunity to do that. Be a guide instead of a hunter. Your opening weekend, you've had time to ponder it, and it looks like it was a good one for a lot of you. Oh, man, Sean Couch, sorry, at least you did get a rooster in the bag before they towed off your pickup truck. Hope that worked out okay. Zachary Morrow, skunk, 5 minutes into the opening weekend. Yow. Travis Hampton found quail. And Jake and Oner found somebody else's rooster, it looks like. And I don't know about you, but that head-high grass doesn't seem to produce near as much as we like to think it does. I'm staying out of it, and I've got a broken rib to prove why I'm staying out of it these days. Youth opener for Jeff Van Zanten. Glad you could take a few kids out. Good job for you. Jim Millencypher, of course, we're always jealous of you. 6 weeks in, yeah, you're hunting those prairie grouse, even some forest grouse. And I'm glad to hear the chickens are in profusion this year. Young birds for a lot of people, us included. I remember a few birds that it was hard to tell whether they were chukars or quail. They were so small. Great day with the son and his dog. Only got one bird, but she went on point several times for Mike McCullough. Excellent. Colin Farrell, I'm going to steal this one. Lots of well-armed nature walks. Yeah, the bird numbers, the jury's still out on those. Great picture. No matter how well he's doing the rest of the time, that's just a great shot right there. Silhouetted against a cloudy sky with a few hills in the background on kind of a knob with a lot of foreground. It's It's, it's painting worthy, that's for sure. Dry and warm for a lot of people from Grant Goblish on down. Good for us, a lot of young birds, says Jared Newgard. Chad Clayberg, sorry, Chad, had a blast on a Western Oregon pheasant hunt. Excellent. Dog did great. That's what matters, isn't it? Chuckers and Huns for Mike Allen. My first sage grouse hunt had a fantastic experience, says Chris Lee Hamby. Or is this Chris and Lee? That's what I hate about Facebook. Anyway, good shot, beautiful country, and love the video, by the way. Thanks a lot. First pheasants over the pup, and she did amazing. Talon Gray, welcome, and good dog. Lots of great stuff. I know it was windy, Lynn Glock, over there. I got lots of reports from South and North Dakota, both. Hard to hunt. At least in South Dakota, you had a weekend ahead of us just for yourselves. Everybody else joined the parade the next weekend. Hot, dry in a lot of places. Cork green, you did get out, and that's what's important. So keep up the good work. Great shot, Avian Gertis. Avian, is that really your name? I love it. And hey, I've been there before. That's a great place to stay, by the way. I'm glad it worked for you. And everybody else who contributed to that discussion on their opening weekend, I'm glad for you. It didn't matter, did it? Lots of folks pointed out that there weren't near as many birds as there could be, but it was still pretty fun. That part of the program brought to you by TrulockChokes. Scott Trulock has made a real commitment to those of us shooting sub-gauge guns and those of us who shoot side-by-sides. And I've pointed it out before. I want to point it out one more time now that you're into the season a bit and thinking about maybe doing what I've been recommending for a while, and that is replace your factory choke tubes. Well, Scott is still committed to helping you, and if if your aesthetic on your side-by-side is flush-mounted chokes instead of extended chokes, they will make them for you, even if it's not in their long list of available choke tubes. They will make them for you specially. All you got to do is call them. Same price. Just call Scott. Go to the website, TrulockChokes.com. Call Scott, and he'll make you a pair that will look good, because you can't see them, on your vintage or your, what do I call them, contemporary side-by-sides. And once you get your new choke tubes, the first thing you're going to do is use a little bit of that sageandbreaker.com firearms grease on the threads. That's just one of the many things that I am constantly replenishing over the season. I use that CLP, the spray-on cleaning, lubricating, and protection spray-on liquid every day at the end of the hunt. Use that both inside and outside. Open the gun up, give it a little bit of a spray here and there. And all the other expendables that are out there, from, like I said, the solvents to the firearms grease, to the most convenient and versatile bore cleaning tool you've ever seen. You want to learn more? Go to sageandbreaker.com. Well, always good to talk with him. I learn something every time we discuss bird dogs and bird hunting, bird dog training, and all the related stuff. T's Doghouse is the name of his operation. Talmage Smedley joins me. You know him from Gun Dog Magazine, all sorts of other things, including a bunch of videos and some classes online, that type of thing. Talmage, welcome back to the Upland Nation podcast.
Thanks, Scott. I'm excited to get to visit with you again.
You really give me food for thought every time we talk, and that's why I thought we should talk again. You wrote on something a while back that we don't talk enough about. We kind of dismiss it. when we talk about working with a pro trainer, the next thing most people say is, and you ought to go too and be part of the training process. And we're going to delve deep into that. But here we are deep into the hunting season in some places, and some of us still getting warmed up. But you were out doing something just this morning. You tell me about your brief hunt this morning.
Yeah, I got to go out this morning with my son and my daughter. My daughter's gotten more involved this past year. She's finishing up her schooling and some other things she was doing, and she's been, involved with us more, which we've really enjoyed. Helps with some of the video editing and shooting some video and just with the business side of things and then going out and she's been getting into the hunting more. So it's been fun to introduce her to it. She didn't really go at all growing up. She played a lot of sports and didn't have any interest in the bird dogs and the hunting. But so it's been really fun to get her involved. And this morning we were out with the cameras and with the dogs mostly we were just working on getting footage and some photos that we were looking for and some video footage of handling the dogs on the wild birds. So the area we were running today was actually sharptail and pheasants, and neither of them were we able to shoot today. The sharptail are in a draw unit, and the pheasants haven't opened. They don't open for a couple more weeks yet. So we just had some really good dog work and some really good time together. That's actually some of my favorite time is the training rather than just the hunting, but
yeah,
anyway, it was a good time.
I do know. And in fact, earlier in the podcast, I mentioned being a guide for others who don't get the chance to go as often as we do. And that's, part and parcel to what you're describing there. And I'm intrigued that she's finally developing an interest and, there's a lesson in that probably as well.
Yeah.
Maybe we shouldn't push them into it. We'll let them discover it themselves.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, with sports, all sports, including the hunting, it seems like the more pushing you do, the more pushback you get. and then sometimes even resentment, and then you lose the opportunity to share it with people. So invitations and keeping doors open seems to be more effective.
Hold that thought. I'm going to write it down. It's so true. And you just, I was out, not quite as far as towards you, but out in country that most people don't think of as sharptail country. And that's what I was chasing over in southeast Idaho earlier in the season, and had a good time and was frankly surprised at how many birds I saw. How do you think your sharptail population compares to previous seasons?
I think our finds, I think, are the same. Our groupings feel a little smaller to me than last year. So that's probably how I would say from what I've seen is same number of contacts and everything as we've been used to the last few years, but this time it seems like the groups might be a little bit smaller. That's
what I've heard almost everywhere, even in the traditional sharptail locations. So well, we got our fingers crossed, and hopefully the season, the weather will cooperate this year, and
right.
We'll see a good reproduction. I want to jump into this because it's so important to us. But before we do, you have a different way of thinking about things, and I keep I'm sure I've referenced this before. You're a dog trainer, but that's not all you do, and I think it forms your philosophy towards training animals in general. So why don't you tell us a little bit about where is the intersection of horses and dogs?
Wow, yeah, the intersection for me was when I was 6 years old. I just really, really passionately drawn to both. And so my whole life I've just dedicated actually all day, every day to horses and dogs. But earlier on, I decided to make the horses my living because I felt like the dogs were probably my greatest passion. And I didn't want to poison the dogs with the need to survive and make a living and do it for other people and all those things that can make it a little bit more challenging than just riding your own horse, or working your own dog. So I made my living for 23 years training horses, and then the dogs were my very big passion on the side. And they were always a big passion, big enough that sometimes
it became a conflict with what I was doing with my horses and with what my customers felt like I should spend my time doing, you know. So it was a big passion. But then, of course, after my head injury, I couldn't ride for quite a few years. And so the dogs stepped in and actually provided a way that I could provide for my family still. So felt very blessed in that recovery that I didn't lose everything, as you might say, which happens often when people lose their ability to make their living, you know. So, but the dogs and the horses, the interesting thing is there's been a lot of clinicians, you know, well, a couple that I'm thinking of specifically with the horses that would always refer to the horses and the dogs and talk about how different they were because one was a prey animal and one was a predator. And that is true that there is difference because they're prey animals and predators. But I've really found that when you really get down to the nuts and bolts, to the, you know, the skeleton of what makes everything work, I really believe that the horses, the dogs, and the humans are the same. You know, there's things that we make all our decisions trying to gain something or trying to avoid something. And so then that's how we learn and that's how we grow and that's how we go through life is assessing things and deciding what helps us get what we want to get and what helps us avoid what we want to avoid. And so in that way, I think we're all the same. And when you think on that level, then it helps blend those worlds together and it becomes quite simple in my mind to go from one to another.
You know, if you had taken each critter separately, human, horse, dog, I would have said human instinct, horse instinct, dog instinct. We are all still instinctive. We just try to sublimate it sometimes and consider ourselves more sophisticated. But you're describing some pretty basic stuff.
Yeah.
Where's the intersection then between training a dog and training a human, and how does that process work? You're a pro at this. You do it all the time. Most of us are probably going to train our own dogs, but we still need to train ourselves, or we need to go to a trainer who will help train us. Right.
Yeah. And I think that, and sometimes we just have to get trained on how to really train ourselves. You know, sometimes we're not really aware of why we're doing things or even what we're doing.
Yeah.
Right. And so sometimes that's the biggest thing, is somebody helping us understand what we're doing that might be causing a problem, or what we might need to start doing to help change something that we don't find favorable about our dog's actions or behaviors. And so, that's the trick of all of it is figuring out how do we do the things that we need to do to have the results that we want, and how do we stop doing the things that are preventing the results that we want. And, you know, when we think on that, that's right back to what I was saying, the gain and the avoidance. And, you know, that's really what it all comes down to. And the challenge that I see with the humans and the dogs is that we all see what we want. So we can see a dog in action and say, man, I would love to have a dog like that. And sometimes we might even say, you know what, Jim always has great dogs. He's the luckiest guy I know. And why can't I find a dog like Jim has? Or I've had people say to me, man, I just can't ever find a real big running dog, like a real all-age dog. I'd love to have an all-age dog, and none of my dogs ever become all-age dogs. And so always has all-age dogs. And we're quick to say, oh, that must be genetics, which genetics definitely plays a part. But also just the way a dog is brought up and the way that it's introduced to the world, and you know, that some people's way of acting with their dogs creates the result that they want, and other people's way of acting with their dogs will prevent them from ever having the results that they want unless they can change the way they're acting. And that's why, you know, like we were leading into at the beginning, that's why it's so important to assess ourselves and see what training we need, because ultimately our dog will never develop habits that cause it to perform beyond what our abilities and our habits allow.
You know, I'm nowhere near as advanced as most dog trainers, especially amateurs, but one thing I tell everybody to do is watch their dogs more carefully and think about why they're doing the things they do. The teacher who taught me to teach, the only thing I'm legally qualified to do, watched us. So he was the dog trainer and we were the dogs when in undergraduate school when we were learning how to do all the things that make you a good teacher.
Right.
We need you to be that professor for us. Somebody's got to watch the human in this transaction. The dog, he can't make notes. He can't explain it in your language. So somebody else has got to do a little bit of that. Is that what you're getting to?
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's very beneficial to have somebody, a third party that can see what's going on. And if you have a third party, like a trainer, for instance, that knows how to adjust. When we send a dog to a trainer, we expect certain things out of that transaction, right? So we're going to send a dog in and that dog is going to change and we expect it to come back to us changed.
Yeah.
And knowing more than it knew when we sent it there. And when that dog does that and it comes back knowing more, it knows more because of the actions of the other person. And if we had acted the exact same way as that trainer that we paid to train that dog, if we did all the same things he did, we would have gotten the same result. And so it to me, that's empowering for a person to realize that the key really is in them and in what they're doing and in how they're doing it that's going to cause the dog to change. And the key to why the dog's the way it is might also be in them, whether that's good or bad, in the way that they've interacted, in the way they handle a situation, in the way they react to a situation. So understanding that and realizing that the key to all of our success is our own knowledge. If we can incorporate a professional trainer to teach the dog, but if the dog then comes back to us and we continue to be the same person that we were before we sent the dog to the trainer, then the dog will revert back to some degree to the way that we functioned. And sometimes that can look like we wasted our money or that the job didn't get done by the trainer. Mm-hmm. But if we take a human, which we know is of higher intellect than a dog, and we consider a human that has some behaviors that need to be changed, but we could use drug addiction as a thing, and that dog goes through that human goes through rehab, and then it comes back into the exact same environment that it was in prior to the rehab. We know that the success rate of that is very low, and that's a human. So when we take a dog and it has habits and behaviors that it's developed in its life, and we take that and we send it to a trainer, and the trainer does his work and works real hard and changes those things, and then we bring that dog a month or 2 months or 3 months later back, then the chances of its behaviors that it's learned going away and its old behaviors coming back is very high. If that environment hasn't changed.
And there you go. I mean, when you lay it out in those terms, it's very obvious. It's easy to talk about. It's hard to do. And it starts at the trainer's place when we go to visit or go to work with you. And that's, I think, where the rubber meets the road. We can talk a good game, but you're basically talking about behavioral change in the human as well. How do we start that? What do you do as a pro? Somebody calls you and says, I want a dog that does the things that guy's dog does. Or I want a dog with these skills and attributes. What are you going to tell that person who maybe has never worked with a trainer before? How do you introduce this idea?
Candidly, I just say you should become a member of teasdoghouse.com because a little shameless plug. That is our effort, and it is something that's a way of thinking. So, for instance, my son, he had hunted with us, Tanner, and he's very involved in the website. Mm-hmm. And he had hunted with me growing up, but he was a very passionate and very good basketball player.
Yeah.
And that's where he had his focus. And a lot of basketball happens during the hunting season.
Yeah.
And so
So he would go when he had a chance, when there was a break that would allow him to go. But he never owned his own dog that he trained. I mean, he had dogs when he was growing up, a puppy that he raised or something like that. But he never was really involved. And then when we decided to shoot our first videos, he sat down with me in the shop and we shot, over 100 videos together. And he listened to me talk about my theory of training and how all this works. And when he finished that process, he was like the best assistant I'd ever had in my life, because he had just been indoctrinated with the way that I thought. And he knew, and he could see the animals, and just listening to me repeating over and over and over as we shot take after take the videos, it got his brain thinking the same way. And then I've noticed the same thing with my daughter, as she's been on there helping edit and hanging around us, and she's watched through all the videos, and her knowledge of dogs and interacting with dogs and getting dogs to do things is way higher than her experience level, just like his was. And then, since then, Tanner's, trained his own dog, and then has been involved in the training of a lot of other dogs. And now he's quite proficient at communicating and helping a dog go through the process. But he also was the same way. He went into it way ahead of what his experience level was, just because he had listened to me speak about what's going on. So I would say, surrounding yourself with people and getting the chance to be with people that are very good at helping dogs learn and develop, and then you just start to see the process and start to figure out how that actually happens. And that's the most important thing right there, is getting your mind in the same place. And we shot a lot of videos that we call the theory videos that are, we tried not to make them boring. We tried to have them be fairly short in content, so that people don't have to sit down and listen to an hour-long one. But they're the nuts and bolts of everything. And often the thing that when I have students come that they don't listen to, right? They want to see the action, but they don't listen to the thoughts behind how the dog's mind works, and how and how communication happens, and how the dog gains its information from us, that it sees what we're doing and it hears what we're saying and it feels our touch and it feels our physical communication. And through that sight and touch and sound, that's how it gains its information to make its decisions. And so, being aware that everything that we do, from our actions, our voice and our touch, all is how that dog's making its decisions, is from that information, So anyway, I'm rambling on, but that's a key, is getting into the right thought process so that you understand how a dog thinks and learns and develops. And then once you have that, then the nuts and bolts of all of it, that just makes a lot of sense and comes a lot more natural, because you're seeing it as common sense if you understand how the dog commonly thinks.
Well, what you're describing is a process we went through to become a teacher. For example, we take a lot of pedagogy classes, where you learn why you teach the way you do, what you need to teach, how you need to teach it. It's all theory at that point. You use that term, and I think it's absolutely right. At some point, they throw you into a classroom, or in this case, they throw you into a yard with a young dog, and you got to do what you've been talking about all semester. And that's what we'll talk about in the second half. Is we're going to show up. We got a puppy. We're going to work together on that, and I want to get into the nuts and bolts of that a little bit more. But before I do, you brought Tanner along, and by the way, he's become quite a good editor too. But you brought him along in so many ways, and you never mentioned the best e-collar setting for a human.
That's right. By the time I started working with him, he was as big as I was, so I wasn't going to wasn't going to jump into that battle.
No, not at all. You reflect on that, and we'll get back to you in just a moment. That's Tanner. No, it's not. It's Tanner's dad, Talmage Smedley, T's Doghouse. Learn more about them at tsdoghouse.com. We'll be back with more from Talmage, and then a little bit in our Fix It segment about finding pigeons right after a quick word from Pro Plan Sport dog food from Purina. I talk about the nutrition. Hunted hard. Last weekend hunted 4 days in a row. And Flick amazed me. By the way, his pads are doing great. But in large part because this nutritive component, the way Purina designs performance dog food is just different and more well thought out. They got more nutritionists, they got more doctors, they got more scientists, they got more folks putting together the 30-20 formulas that make Pro Plan Sport dog food the greatest tasting, highest calorie fuel for your dog. Just the right proportions of everything. If you want to learn more about that aspect of it, go to ProPlansport.com. And as usual, I'm the guy with the side-by-side square peg and round hole on most of the hunts we've done so far this year. Loving my pointer shotguns. Although I do have a developing affinity for their new FT12 semi-auto. But if you're looking to effectively upgrade, and maybe the upgrade for you is to a side-by-side, lots of choices at pointershotguns.com and lots of places to find them. Hundreds of independent retailers, plus all the big boxes from Bass Pro to Cabela's, Sportsman's Warehouse to Turner's Outdoorsman. Take a look at the colors that they can put on it with Cerakote, the case hardening that they can do on your receiver. It's all available, probably closer to you than you think. Learn more at pointershotguns.com. And welcome back to the Upland Nation podcast. Scott Linden here on the other end of the line. Talmage Smedley joins me from T's Doghouse, somewhere over there, about a mountain range away from me and a little bit to the north, I think. Whereabouts are you located, Talmage?
I'm actually in northern Utah.
Yeah.
Up in the Ogden is the larger city that we're right on the outskirts of.
Heck, I could have come over for lunch. I was in Tremonton recently.
Yeah.
Just up the road from you. Now that I think about it.
Just about a half hour north of where my home is.
Long story short, I was desperate for propane, and that was the closest place to be. So thank you, everybody at Miller's, who really did the job. I appreciate that.
Yeah, very good.
We were talking earlier about, the kind of I'll call it the mindset. We got to get the humans into a mindset that will allow them to think more about training their dog better. So I'm showing up. I got a puppy. Let's say it's a several month old puppy. I'm bringing it to you. I hand him over, and most people would say, "Call me when he's ready," and that would be that.
Yeah.
What are you going to say instead?
Well, I think that, if you came with that, then I would say, okay, I'm glad you brought me the puppy. Thank you. But we should get together in a couple weeks. We should get together definitely at the end of a month and go over things. And then of course we have the video support online that can help show them what is being done with their dog while it's with us.
Yeah.
So that hopefully they can have an idea of how we got the dog to do the things that we're teaching the dog to do. The longer the dog's with the trainer, the more something can become a habit, and the deeper the dog's knowledge can become to where the dog maybe is making the decision because it works best for it also. For instance, pointing. If a dog realizes, if I point, the bird stays on the ground. If I run in there to catch it, it flies away and it gets away. And then if the dog realizes, if I'll point, that bird will stay on the ground. If I let the human flush it, they'll shoot it, and then I can go retrieve it. And if, the longer the dog has to tie all that together to where the dog said, why would I chase a bird off if I can point it and wait for this guy to come shoot it? Right. And that's where we would like all our dogs to be, is have that mindset. So that might stick longer, right? That might be something that the dog says, I'm still going to do it this same way when the other human shows up.
Sure.
But if the other human started to shoot birds that flushed on their own and the dog loved to retrieve, then pretty soon the dog could be like, hey, with this guy, I guess I don't really need to stand still. I can just make it fly and he'll shoot it for me anyway. So the human could still change that behavior, even though it had spent 3 or 4 or 5 months learning it and performing it appropriately, right? We see that a lot if a dog learns to stand steady to wing shot and fall, and then it goes out with its hunter who once the birds start flying, they start shooting, and they give all disregard to the dog. They don't pay any attention to what the dog's doing. Every dog eventually is going to be like, I think I'll just run out there and pick that bird up that I saw fall. If it's okay with you, and if it's okay with you, they're going to,
Yeah.
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 And now that training regresses, and we can see in that example, the training regressed not because the dog was doing something wrong, but because the handler was doing something wrong. And then when the handler stopped handling the way the dog was used to, then the dog started saying, I think this game seems to be different. How should I play it with this guy? And then they start to make their adjustments. Though that handler, that owner could very well take that dog back to the trainer and say, hey, he needs a refresher course. He's coming undone. His training's coming undone. And his training didn't come undone. You undid it. You retrained him to know that wasn't required anymore. And excuse me.
Well, that's a good chance for me to ask the question then. So again, we're back to what is the right setting for the human on the e-collar. So let's and let's drill down on that particular example, because that's it's one that a lot of us want. We want a steadier dog, however you define that.
Yeah. Yep.
So what are you going to do between the hunting day when that problem starts to rear its ugly head and when they've brought the dog to you to learn how to be steady? What do you do with the human?
So the key to that is helping the human get reps.
Yeah.
The steadiness of a dog is very connected to the human and how the human acts when the dog's on point.
Yeah.
So if a human walks in, for instance, and they're saying, whoa, 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 then in their mind, they're trying to prevent the dog from doing the wrong thing by flushing the bird. Mm-hmm. But in the dog's mind, they're poisoning, because the word whoa becomes a command.
Yeah.
And when it's a command, and when it's followed up by an e-collar that might also be helping enforce that, then the dog, while it's pointing, doing what it loves the most, being in that scent with that bird on the ground, the whole reason it just ran all over that hillside was to get into that situation, to be on point with the scent in their nose, feeling whatever that chemical reaction is that makes them stand like a statue and drool and flare their nostrils and bug their eyes out and all that stuff that we love to see. And during that time, we, with our e-collar or with our poisoned word whoa, because whoa's been associated with pressure and making the dog do something, we are injecting little negative, shots into that, what should be the greatest part of that dog's entire day. And we're negating the positive experience that is. And because of that, the dog may decide the best thing is when that bird flies. And then the dog might even decide that it's just not even going to do the pointing thing because it just attracts a human, which is really truly a pain in the butt. Mm-hmm. I'm going to quit pointing altogether. I'm just going to go back to chasing them, because I like pointing them and letting him shoot them better at first. But now that he's coming in and he's constantly picking at me and speaking to me and poisoning my awesome experience, then I'm just going to change my mind and have a different experience. Right. So the way the human was acting, their skill set got in the way of the dog's skill set. So the dog reverted. So the important thing is to bring the human in with the dog and start building the human skill set. And if a human is going to have a dog steady to wing, shot, and fall, which for some hunters, that becomes the ideal, right? And if they're going to do that, that is 100% dependent on them having the skill set. to be able to have a dog that is steady to wean, shot, and fall, because it means knowing what your dog's doing and not killing the bird if your dog isn't performing the way it's been taught to perform.
Mm-hmm.
It means coming in the right way, knowing how to flush, knowing how to make a correction if it needs to be made, and, all those things, so that your skill set of shooting and handling the dog is high enough that you can actually maintain that when you're hunting. And it's not an easy thing, because it's kind of like looking out the side of your head while you're also looking forward at the bird, and maybe in the back of your head, because that's where your dog is behind you while you're flushing the birds in front of you. And that's where how you flush and the situations you put yourself in, so that you know where your dog is and you know what your dog's doing when the birds come up. So it's a lot more complicated than people might realize when they're just thinking it's up to the dog being trained, and then after that I just walk in and shoot birds. And that's not the case, because unless the dog has been hunted properly by somebody with the skill set to keep it steady, wing, shot, and fall for years, and it's just an old dog that's just very, very established in its ability to do that and has habits strong enough to withstand your poor habits, then your dog's going to revert back. So in the preseason, the summertime, it wouldn't just be a time of teaching a dog, but it would be a time of getting repetitions where you're walking in, you're thinking of how you're flushing, you're thinking of your approach and how to know what the dog's doing. And so you're not only building a habit in the dog, but you're building habits in yourself, having a system set up so that you know how you're going to make a correction if the dog did break. And how do you do that with your collar, and how quick can you be to your collar if you need it? Or is it hanging down on your hip, and you're going to have to, almost set your gun down to be able to pick your collar up and look at it and see and make sure everything's the way you need it before you make a correction. All those kinds of things are important things when we're working with the dog to have it steady to wing, shot, and fall.
Yeah.
So then a handler is going to have to decide and just say, I'm okay. My skill set is such that if my dog just holds point till I get there and flush the birds, I'm good enough, Or are they going to say, I would like more than that, therefore I need to go build my skill set to be more than that, while I also help the dog's skill set become more than that. And that would be where they might use a pro.
I think another, pardon me, still recovering, but at least it doesn't hurt to talk anymore. But I think one of the things we don't do enough of, and that's the real value of a trainer in many respects, is we can ask those why questions. Well, why is the dog doing that? And why should I do this as the dog does or doesn't do that? Thinking slightly more analytically is probably a big change in our thought process. And then that idea of a trainer helping us build reps and the right kind. Those seem to be crystal clear to me. They're just easier said than done. I mean, do you give your clients assignments? And maybe you don't make them write them down, but do we have homework when we come back from a session with you? Yeah,
you should, especially if it's and an ongoing relationship with the trainer. Yeah. I think it's really easy for an owner to drop the dog off for training, and then they take the dog when they pick it up, and then they go hunting. Mm-hmm. And often there's no feedback to a trainer, of how things have gone. I think from my viewpoint as a trainer, I love to hear the positive. I love to hear, hey, we're so pleased with the way this dog's doing. We're so pleased with all these things, but I also want to hear these are the things we're struggling with. But if you can build a relationship with a trainer where the approach is, here's the things we are struggling with, are you able to help me know what I need to do to help my dog maintain what it's learned? Then those are important things. And maybe a trip back to the trainers with the dog to go through some setups so that you can see what skills you need to work on to help the dog. And having a mindset that I'm going to approach this as the trainer can help me become what I need to be so my dog can become what it needs to be, rather than a mindset of my dog isn't performing the way I had anticipated or hoped for, therefore I'm upset at the trainer.
Yeah.
Or I know that the dog performed well when it was at the trainer and it's performing poorly now, so I'm embarrassed to go back and talk to the trainer, right? Both those mindsets are going to prevent you and your dog from reaching a higher level and are going to be hard on the relationship you have with the trainer that you've chosen. But an approach to a trainer saying, hey, can you help me know what I need to do and how I need to change so that my dreams can come true with this dog, you know, and having that mindset keeps a good relationship with the trainer and opens up the doors to be able to learn. And always, the humans are always the first place that the change starts. If there needs to be change in the dog, it will never happen unless the human first changes the environment to the way that the dog will understand and have a desire to perform the way we want to perform. So it's always the human. It's always the human. I mean, that's hard to admit, but it's always the human that's going to create the change. That's why you send it to a trainer, is you believe that human knows what to do differently. So then the dog changes. And so, that's where it needs to be a partnership. And I understand that the reason you use a trainer, my favorite scenario is a very knowledgeable owner that could train the dog himself, but doesn't have the time. Mm-hmm. He's spending his time making the money to get to run around and do the hunting he wants to do. And he needs somebody to take some of that money and help prepare his dog for the hunting he needs to do. But if if it's a knowledgeable person that could truly train their own dog, but they decide to send it to me because I have the time to dedicate to the dog, that's the perfect scenario. Because when I get done and they receive the dog, they have the knowledge to be able to take that dog and maintain what's been done and even continue to help that dog move forward through the hunting season. So that's ideal scenario. So that's why I think people that want that great dog and want that experience of having an amazing dog and then another amazing dog to follow it, then number one thing needs to be build a relationship with a trainer and dig in to books and everything else to gain the knowledge that you need to have, because you're the other partner and it's never gonna go to a level above where you are.
That's Talmage Smedley. I'm Scott Linden. This is the Upland Nation podcast. You can reach Talmage at teasdoghouse.com. We're in the middle of the season and you start getting those phone calls. Talmage, you did a great job, but now the dog is starting to do this, or he's not doing that. What are the most common topics of those phone calls?
Yeah, most of the time I think it's a dog that isn't retrieving like they were hoping, or it's not pointing like they were hoping. Uh-huh. It's maybe putting birds in the air early. It's not being cautious enough on the birds. It's maybe if they wanted something that was steady to wing and shot or wing, shot, and fall, then the dog's moving as the human comes into position to shoot. The dog's anticipating the flight of the birds and actually moving before birds have flown, or moving when they fly, or moving when the gun goes off. Those are generally the things. Sometimes it's also handling. If they have a lot of dog, it can be, my dog is not coming and going with me like I would hope. But I think I hear less of that because I think a lot more people, when that happens, are willing to go with the dog.
Yeah.
Because the dog's going where it's going most likely because it thinks that's where there's going to be birds. So a lot of hunters, just kind of turn the dog loose and let the dog help decide where they're going to go. Yeah. Which, that works for a lot of people. And other people want to go their specific places. And then they might also be calling and saying, hey, I'm having a hard time getting my dog to stay to the front. It wants to run with the wind a little bit more, keep its nose into the wind and head off its own direction. But for the most part, I would say that the main things are retrieving and pointing. So, steadiness.
Let's take that steadiness question, because again, those are top priorities of our listeners, and I think we can just change a little bit of thinking there. So you did a great job. The dog was steady to wing, shot, and fall. You deliver the dog to the owner. The owner calls you in November and says, it's not what it was on opening weekend. Do you ask questions? Do you invite them to come back? What are kind of some of the fixes you're going to offer them?
Hopefully we've gone over things earlier. Yeah. But again, a human, we know that if they've come and they've done a number of reps with me on 2 or 3 different occasions, and I think I gave them all the information they need to have,
but they leave and there's something that they didn't remember, then certainly that's going to cause the dog to backslide. But it's really pretty, we should expect they're not going to remember everything, because 2 or 3 times, 4 or 5 repetitions in their life with a lot of explanation from a trainer, to take that all in and then change bad habits and create good habits off that little of interaction, we're probably expecting too much from the human. And if we're expecting too much from the human, we're certainly expecting too much from the dog, because the human should be able to think through those things and learn those things quicker than the dog is going to, I would think. So, so that's where you got to have the information first. But the key I've found is that if I've used phrases and I have taught the human what I'm referring to when I use a certain phrase or when I make a certain comment, when I say, well, are you stopping to flush? When that dog moves its feet, when's it moving its feet? And are you stopping it from moving its feet, or are you trying to prevent it from moving its feet? I want to stop it when it moves its feet. I don't want to be the person preventing it from moving its feet, because that means I am injecting, like I said earlier, a negative into the positive of the dog. If it hasn't put the bird in the air, no foul. If I'm taking that good experience, even a creeping dog, I'm going to let that dog creep till it puts the bird in the air, and then I'm going to make the correction. I'm not going to stop it from creeping. I'm going to let it know why I didn't want it to creep. And I didn't want it to creep because of putting the bird in the air. And if it puts the bird in the air, I'm not shooting the bird. I'm stopping you. I'm stopping the dog, making a correction. And so, I can say that. How's the stop to flush? Is the dog volunteering its own stop to flush or stop to bump? Is it putting pressure on, but as soon as the bird flies, it's standing still? Or is it putting pressure on, and when the bird flies, it's moving with the bird? That's two different behaviors. Mm-hmm. And so, I can ask some questions, and if they know what I mean by the terminology that I'm using, then a lot of times over the phone, we can come to an understanding of what's going on, and I can coach them through the behavior that they are exhibiting that's causing the dog to exhibit the behavior that they don't want the dog exhibiting. And so that's a big thing with being with your trainer and going through things with your trainer is knowing their lingo and knowing the steps that got the dog there, because those are the same steps that we're going to take to return the dog to being correct. And so that's one of the big things, is so that when we're talking to each other, we're not talking past each other, but we're actually getting down to the skeleton, if you will, and figuring out exactly where the adjustments need to be made. And it can seem real complicated to the handler, the owner, but it might seem very clear to the trainer.
Yeah.
I might, as soon as they call me, I might have, from my experience with them and my understanding of them and the dog, just as soon as they tell me what's going on, I might have a pretty good picture in my mind of why it's happening, and then I can talk them through it right on the phone,
Yeah, and I think that's a good place to kind of interject that what's really important about it, training a dog and the dog's human, is creating a long-term relationship with amongst all three of you. Now that I think about it, so that when a little problem rears its head, the owner knows that's a problem and knows they need help, and will come back to the person who ideally taught their way through that problem earlier on. How common is that, or do you face frustration every year with a certain number of owners who they think there's no return policy, there's no money back guarantee, they're just stuck?
Yeah. I think the thing that is, hard for me is any phone call that's just trying to place blame.
Yeah.
Place blame, because if it's trying to place blame, it's either going to be blaming the dog or it's going to be blaming me.
Yeah.
And the dog doesn't have the ability to foresee what's going on and to sort out the whole thing and then coach the handler on what they need to change,
And if they're trying to put the blame on me, I'm the one that can help them. So why do we start that dialogue? Why don't we just start a dialogue of how to get to where we need to get?
Yeah.
And so the blame game, that'll stop everybody's progress. That'll be what ends a relationship. And then the only way, if you don't have the knowledge yourself to fix it, and you go play in a blame game and create a bad relationship with the trainer that helped you build the dog in the first place, now your only option is to go find a different trainer, which is going to mean building a new relationship, learning new sets of lingo, it's going to be work to ever get to the place that you need to be to have your dog achieve the dreams that you wanted your dog to achieve. And so it's really it just is such a big setback for people. And often it's something that just prevents the dreams from ever really coming true with that dog, So I love the phone calls of, I love to be helpful in every way I can. I love to work to help the dog's dreams come true and the human's dreams come true. To do that, though, we have to leave the blame on ourselves. We can't be trying to turn it and shift it to other places. Even if we didn't do anything to cause it in our mind, somehow we didn't do anything to prevent it from happening. So whether we purposely went in to cause the problems, the answer is what do we change in our behavior to get the behaviors that we want from our dogs?
You're talking about at least a minimum of going another level down, deeper into all of the relationships, whether it's the dog with the trainer with the human with their dog. We got to get below the surface at least a level or two and start thinking about things on a different, more analytical basis. And I love that idea. You were going to say?
Yeah. I think I loved what you said right there too, because we start talking about foundation, the deeper level we go, and how far back do we go. And that's another thing that makes a relationship with a trainer very valuable from the beginning, because we build a dog with building blocks, and the way we do things when they're puppies, is going to carry in and affect the way they think about things when we're doing things when they're a little older. And then it's just a system that builds on itself. And so, the sooner the sooner the owner of the dog works along the mindset of a trainer, the more success they'll most likely have. The dogs I have always had the most success with are the dogs that I raised as puppies.
Sure.
Because that all your building blocks are in place, that your foundation is strong. And if you have something come up, hopefully you've built in that foundation all the lines of communication and all the abilities you need with that dog to quickly help that dog understand the way you need things to be, or to quickly correct that dog. And when I say correct the dog, I'm not saying just punish the dog for doing the wrong thing, but make it correct again. Take it at what it was doing wrong and then help the dog become correct again. That's what a correction is to take the dog back to the correct thing or help it understand the correct thing again. And so if that's all been built from the ground up in a system to have everything in place, then we shouldn't run into anything that requires us to tear down walls and dig deep into the foundation and make a repair. But if the dog is just, not been in any system except a kennel and run free willy out through the fields until it's 2, and then you send it to a trainer and say, okay, now I would like this dog to be steady to wean, shot, and fall. Well, now we don't have a foundation. And so the foundation has to be built before you can ever build that other stuff. Otherwise you will be building a house on sand. You'll be building a house with no foundation, no footing in it, and it won't hold up. Even if you did pay for 5 months, or 3 months, or whatever you did pay, if the foundation didn't get put into place, then when we run into problems, we don't have anything to fall back on.
Well, Those are lessons in life and in dog training both, and I can't think of a better person to talk about that foundational thinking process than you, Talmage Smedley. tsdoghouse.com. tsdoghouse.com is the best address for him. Lots of videos, lots of other things there that you might want to grab hold of. Talmage, it's always fun. You change my thinking every time we talk, and I appreciate that because I need all the help I can get. Thanks so much for coming back on and being a part of the Upland Nation podcast.
You bet. Thanks for having me, Scott.
Have a great day. Bye-bye.
You too. Bye-bye.
And we're going to talk about finding training birds. Simple question, complicated answer, but we're going to cover that among other things coming up, so stick around. After this word from Mid-Valley Clays and Shooting School, got a hunting report from Dave Fiedler over there. I know he was just rubbing it in. But he said, yeah, we were out that day, shot 5 quail and 3 pheasants with 8 shells. And I thought, well, I'll never get there, but thanks to them, I'm doing much better than I used to. If you're looking for a lesson this time of year, maybe you're just not quite hitting them like you hoped you would. Swing on by. They're in Western Oregon, midvalleyclays.com. Good place to start right there. And, of course, if you're looking for a sub-gauge shotgun, or a 12-gauge for that matter, they got more in stock than ever before, especially field-grade guns, appropriate for whatever you're hunting. Learn more at midvalleyclays.com. And can't say enough about how the HiViz sites have affected my shooting, in addition to my lessons at midvalleyclays.com. HiViz sites have just changed the equation, especially for this cross-dominant guy. Now I can see what I've been missing, literally. Don't have to look at the muzzle of the gun because it's being seen by my mind as I'm looking at the moving target, whether it's a downhill chucker or, yeah, I had a chucker tower like a pheasant last weekend. Whew, that was kind of fun. Nice and close, too, so I did it. But it was, in part at least, due to the HiViz sites. If you want to learn more how that all works, go to HiVizSites.com. Well, got an email from a listener, Zachary Fry. Thanks for asking this. I don't know that I've ever really talked about it, and it could be different anywhere you go, but let's fix the problem of finding training birds. There's a lot more to it than just finding them. Pigeon keeping is an art and a science, unless you're me and I just cross my fingers. But we all agree, don't we, that training birds are critical for any number of reasons. No, they're not the same as wild birds, but at least we can use them all year, and we don't have to go find them. They're right there in the loft, ideally. So, Zachary, to answer your question, I'm going to do the first half of your question today. We'll get back to the other part of it down the road. But if you're looking for pigeons for dog training, any number of sources may or may not be available to you. The first, and I would go with this one no matter what, because there are all sorts of other reasons to join your local dog training club. It could be a NAVDA chapter. It could be something else. There are lots of independent organizations out there that are on a local level. So ask around, find a dog training club. Some of those clubs have birds, and you can buy them or borrow them. That reminds me of the joke about selling my homing pigeon 9 times to 9 different people. But ask around, join a club. Sporting goods store, if you got a good sporting goods store that caters to the shooting community, the hunting community, they may have a line on somebody who has too many. If there's a pigeon racing club in town, and they've almost always got a very low profile, ask around enough, you might be able to find somebody and find that club. Those clubs are always breeding too many birds, and they're always looking for somebody to take away some of their young birds, their washouts, whatever. It doesn't matter. That's how I built my flock, is I got some hand-me-downs, washouts from the pigeon racing circuit. So check that. The county or the feds often have somebody in, quote, wildlife control, unquote. More and more these days, those guys are trapping pigeons, and for all I know, they're looking for places to get rid of them. You might check both of those. Even private pest control companies are in that world now. So let your fingers do the walking in whatever we're using now is Yellow Pages, the phone book. That'd be online, of course, and see if you can find somebody in pest control. You can always get a live trap, and try setting that up in places where you have permission. I know the feed store I patronize has a real pigeon problem. They'd probably be glad to have me come in, but I just don't need any more. But maybe you could help them out. A lot of the big commercial and industrial buildings have resident flocks on their roof. You might be able to get permission to do that. Check them all out. Go to the ag operations in your area. The waste grain is one of the biggest pigeon baits around. See if maybe you can help them out a little bit. Zach, I hope that helps a little bit for you. At least you can probably get your hand on some of those. Down the road, I'll talk about keeping them, from this amateur's opinion at least. Good luck and thanks. I hope we fixed it for you. And on that note, thank you, Talmage Smedley. If you want to learn more about his philosophy and watch some of his videos, learn what he has to offer to you in the way of dog training, go to teasdoghouse.com. If you left a comment on the social platforms, thank you very much. I read them all, and some of them end up right here. So thank you very much for your contributions to our ongoing discussions. If you would please leave a rating or a review at Apple Podcasts, that would be very helpful. And thank you to our sponsors, Purina Pro Plan Sport Dog Food, Mid-Valley Clays and Shooting School, TrulockChokes Tubes, Pointer Shotguns, Sage and Breaker Gun Care Products, Heartland Lodge, Cable Gangs, Stakeout Systems, and HiViz Shooting Systems. I hope you're having a great season. Be safe out there. Take somebody new, and maybe I'll see you down the road. I'm Scott Linden. Thanks for listening to the Upland Nation Podcast.